All right, Feisties, this is your favorite and feistiest women's sports show. Why what's happening in your favorite sports is happening. I'm Kelly O'Mara.
And I'm Sarah Gross. And this week we are talking all things Winter Olympics and Paralympics. You might not be paying attention yet, but it's coming up real quick and the athletes are definitely paying attention. And Kelly, I think it's insane. Like, this is what we're going to talk about further down, but how many sports have only recently just opened up to women in the winter sports, like in the list of winter sports that we celebrate at the Olympics?
Yeah, I wonder, I mean, we'll talk about it, but I wonder if it's more in winter than it was in summer, because obviously summer was still adding, you know, the 1,500 meter in swimming and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like 2 Olympics ago and Olympics ago. But yeah, we'll talk about ski jumping, cross country, doubles, luge. You were saying like you're not paying attention yet, but the athletes definitely are. I was thinking about this while I was watching some figure skating this weekend because all the points and everything, like, you don't really pay attention, but the athletes have to be like doing the calculating and which points, and then like they were showing, you know, the
like
Skate Canada Grand Prix, the qualification,
right. Yeah,
to get the height off ranking, because skating is very limited. Figure skating, like there's a cap on how many athletes get to go, as opposed to like some other sports, right?
Right.
And so I'm watching like, you know, Skate Canada Grand Prix, and the stands are like empty, and it's like clear, like this is not, you know, a big deal to us, but it's actually a really big deal. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I always think that's interesting how we don't pay attention until we pay lots and lots and lots of attention.
And then suddenly you're like an expert on the details of figure skating. It is kind of funny.
So I was, besides figure skating this past weekend, what other highlights of the week do we have to tell our listeners about?
Okay,
Sarah?
well, we have our own sport triathlon at the 70.3.
Our own sport.
World. Well, that's
our sport. Do you still
sport.
consider it your own sport?
Okay, actually, not really. But then I just kind of go, oh, our own sport, because I know that that's the way a lot of people think about me as a triathlete. Because obviously, like, you can't be a pro for 14 years, you know, and then be like, oh, it's not my sport anymore. Right? Like, triathlon will forever in some ways be my sport. But really, I don't do triathlon, so I don't want to like imply that level of fitness to anyone, because it's not.
There are some people who just like move on, become a doctor.
Yeah.
Never think about triathlon again.
I feel like I'm kind of in that category. Like,
except for the fact that you go to Kona every year
for
the World
Kona.
Championship.
It's kind of like, no, but there is a hybrid to it. Like, because I go to Kona, but also, as you know, I don't keep up on the race. Like, I don't know. Like, my ability to be a commentator on the Kona race, just like each year, just gets less and less and less. And I'm just more there for the vibes.
You're like, so listen to our podcast. But our sport was the half Ironman 70.3 World Championships this weekend, which I think is, personally, this is an in the weeds take. I think 70.3 Worlds is the best race. I think it's actually way more fun than Kona, than the Ironman World Championships, because you have the women race on one day and then the men race on the next day. Mm-hmm. So everybody gets their own race, but then there's like, it was 6,000 athletes this year, all in like town together. And so people are out watching each other. So it's like, it's just massive. It's fun. The way they've done it the last couple of years is also the end of the season, which I don't think is going to be the case next year. So then it's kind of like a big party. So I like it. I think it's the best.
Yeah, and the way that the race played out was kind of crazy. Like, no one knew what to expect, especially with Lucy and Taylor, who both had like collapsed, you know, just a few weeks ago in Kona. Like, literally heat exhaustion on the pavement, being pulled from the race, did not finish. And we didn't really know if they were able to recover in time for this. And then we saw them just as if nothing happened. You know, going out head to head. We had Lucy ahead like 47 seconds on the swim, which there are some swimmers in the field who could have potentially stayed with her. Nope. She's out front. Taylor catches her up on the bike, like as expected, as if 6 weeks ago they didn't have massive medical problems, you know, even not 6 weeks, 4 weeks.
It was four weeks ago. And Taylor apparently didn't get the okay to race until Monday. From like her doctors and her coach and stuff.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me, actually. And then we finally saw, you know, when we were in Kona, Lucy described how she had her first sort of full year of consistent run training, because she found out fairly recently that she was celiac. And, you know, once you're absorbing nutrients, you can do consistent run training. And I think we finally saw that come to fruition in her like 1:17 half marathon, fastest half marathon ever in a 70.3 distance.
In the world. There's been faster ones, I'm pretty sure. But I think at World Championships.
At World Championships.
Yeah. People don't think of her as a runner, and I think that's obviously not the case anymore. Like, everyone's like, oh, well, she's going to get run down. And they still in their head think of her as a, just like a 3:10 marathoner.
Right.
But she clearly is much faster now.
Yes,
clearly.
Absolutely. So
there is.
Yeah, go ahead.
There is. I was on the field. I was in the camp of like, I don't know, guys. You can be messed up for a while after your core temperature's been that high for that long, and you don't remember anything. It can take a long time. I was like, I don't know. We'll see what happens. I still am like, I hope they're okay. I hope they're like going to recover all winter. But there's also the possibility that they were both very, very fit going into Kona, and then they heavily had to rest for like 3 weeks, and now they're just like. Actually still have that fitness because you don't actually lose fitness up, and then they're just like they were just ready to go.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely the case. Like that's just basically what happened. But I think medically we just weren't sure if they were going to if they were risking anything really. But and
you're like, I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm like, it's one of those where I know both of them are like a little frustrated about. There's been a lot of speculation about them, and you're kind of like, you get frustrated with other people talking out of their ass about you.
Yeah,
and so you're like, I don't know. Like, I don't know what the actual medical situation was.
Right.
I don't know what her doctor said. I don't know where they're at. I just know that actual heat stroke, not just a lot of us are like, oh, I've had heat stroke at a race. Like, no, the actual, like, their core temperature was that high for that long. They don't remember, like, a solid hour or so. That can really fuck you up. That was all. I'm just like, I know that can be. We've like known people that it's been really bad for. But it was a very exciting race.
Yeah, I was very happy for them. Watching Lucy celebrate at the finish line was really cool. She was clearly very excited to have that redemption.
And in third place, there was a first-time 70.3 athlete who came over from kind of the Olympic racing, Tanya Newbert. So kudos all around in Marbella. The race is in Nice next year, and then it's supposed to be back in the U.S. in 2027. So keep your eye. You heard it here first. Rumors. All right, the other thing I was watching because you can't really watch it, but like watching on Instagram this weekend.
Right. Yeah.
Right. There's this race called the Tunnel Hill, I guess.
Okay.
It's an ultra, but it's like an ultra. It's like what the Berlin Marathon is for ultra running, where like people go to set records, and they like, like it's known to be fast. People go there so they can set like fast times.
Flat?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's flat, and I think there's pretty good weather, and
so
there was a 50-mile world record, a 100-mile world record, and a 100K American record, all set.
Wow.
Same. And they all start out together, and then people just like stop at the so like it was just like record after record as people were crossing.
Wow.
Which is kind of nuts. Yeah.
50-mile world record, 5:18:57. That's fast on a trail.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think it's like more fire roady, bike pathy, which is part of why
trail underfoot. It's still swift.
And that was set by Anne Flower, who won Leadville earlier this year, and set the course record there.
Right.
I was about to say on accident she won it, but
no,
I don't think she went out there, was like, it was like her first 100-mile or whatever, and she was like, oh wow, I set a new course record.
Never by accident. Those athletes work very hard, and they go in, even though sometimes I think it's like culturally a thing that we do, is we're like, oh well, we underestimate how much work we've done.
Sure.
And then we kind of go, oh, I didn't know, I didn't expect to win. And of course you don't really, like, a lot of people don't go in thinking I'm going to win, but do they think I could win? Yes. Yeah. Right. So I
think like the top athletes, they know if they could win or not.
Yeah.
Like they like
you know if you're kind of like what's happening in training.
Right.
If you feel healthy enough, I mean, that was definitely my experience when I was going into a race thinking like if thinking that I had a shot at winning, right? And typically those would be the ones that I'd be like on the podium at least, in the 70.3 worlds, one of the guys who has won 70.3 worlds, half Ironman worlds twice, and who was third at Ironman World Championships 2 months ago,
And I thought he was going to do well. He on the stage before the race said, "Oh no, I'm not going to win. I'm not in the place. I'm glad to be up here, but like, nope, this isn't my race." Yeah. And I was like, why? Like, what? But I feel like if somebody said, like, I believed him, and yeah, he got like 20th. Like, so they're like, I don't know. I feel like the athletes, they know though. You're like, all right,
it's true. Right. They do know.
Yeah.
And then
what is interesting though, I was going to say, what is interesting about these ultra records, because the girl who set the 100K American record, Courtney Olson, set the 50-mile record like a year or two ago, that then was broken this time.
Right.
And so she had talked about when she said it, she had to pay for her own drug testing. Like, to get it certified, you have to have drug testing.
Do you know how much they had to pay?
About $4,000.
$4,000.
It was like a couple thousand, and you win like 4,000 at the race or 5,000.
I was gonna say,
so basically
the prize
negated.
Is not that high at these events.
The craziest part, I guess, is that like you have to so to have a record ratified and certified, you have to meet certain right. It has to be like on a certified course, which is why this particular Tunnel Hill race is popular. It has to meet all these different standards, and then you have to like get the drug testing within a certain time period after you have finished. So she had to set it up, and the closest like facility was something like a 4 or 5 hour drive away, because it's like, all these races are not in the middle of big cities. And so she was talking about this last year. I don't know if they figured it out this year, but she had to get in the car right after and drive like 5 hours to go pay for a drug tester to test her.
What? In order to get the record certified.
Yes.
This is the decision that comes from the race organizer themselves, or from
from like from like USATF or IAF, like the body that ratifies these world records, right? Like there are requirements around drug testing. And
so if you set is it the Athletics Federation that ratifies for?
So. Yeah.
Okay, so like if you set a 100 meter, I'm just taking an extreme example here. If you set a 100 meter world record, right?
Yes.
Presumably they have drug testing there, because you're probably at like a World Championships or Olympics or whatever. But if you set a 50-mile record or a 100-mile record at like an obscure race, and the race organizer doesn't have drugs testing, right, you have to go and get it certified off your own dime.
Yeah, so that's what happened last year.
So interesting.
This year, it was technically like the 50-mile national championships for USATF. So maybe they actually had drug testers nearby this year, since they knew.
One would hope that we would stop a situation where these folks who work so hard in order to even just be there to make their $5,000 of prize money doesn't have to then, they set a world record and then they have to pay out $4,000 to get it ratified. Something seems off there. So hopefully
would you pay the money?
Yeah, I would.
Or would you just be like, no, I'm good with my unofficial record?
Yeah, no, I would. I would want it to be official. Yeah.
You would want it to be official.
Yeah, okay. But I still think that that's dumb. Would you?
Yeah, probably. I mean, if you actually set the record, you want it to be like...
Yeah, you want it to be ratified.
I'm sure there's also like sponsor bonuses if you get a record, so then it becomes like...
Maybe there's a break even.
Yeah.
It's the best we could hope for at this point. I don't know. That's crazy. Okay, Kelly, you also went to the Stanford Female Athlete Research Meeting last week?
Yes. I was going to say another highlight of my women's in sports last week was, so there's a consortium, sounds like an evil word, but there's a consortium.
It kind of does. This is a
like,
good consortium.
A good consortium of schools and research facilities that are kind of all working on female athlete, women's health, and sports research that's funded through the WUSI Alliance. So there's a big conference every other year in Boston, and then Stanford's one of the other big schools that's part of this. And so they kind of put on a much smaller, like a 1 day. They just call it a meeting. It's not really a conference. It's like a 1 day. And the idea is that all these researchers come who are working on different projects, so they can be like, hey, I'm working on this. These are like, it's definitely not paper publishable stuff totally yet. Like it's not.
Right.
I mean, some of it is, but a lot of it's like pre-published where you're like, these are the preliminary results we've seen.
Oh, so like
or
sharing
this
ideas.
is the stuff we're working on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or they'll say like, well, these are the results we saw, and they'll present it. And then they'll be like, and now we're going to study it in pregnant women or whatever. Right.
Sure.
So it was really so it was super interesting just to see like where things are at,
Yeah, it's like a real-time update. Like we used to, like when I was doing my PhD, we would have kind of like regular meetings where people would present, like sometimes come from all over the UK to present their current research. And part of that's just to like actually have a dialogue between, so if people can help each other, or if there's stuff coming out of someone's research, they can, and someone else is researching something adjacent to it, which totally makes sense in like the women's health, women's sports performance environment. Yeah.
And so there were kind of like all the topics you always hear. These sort of like ACL tears, obviously, or ACL or MCL, knee injuries are huge for female athletes still. Like, but it's really funny because like, the people getting up to present on like cutting edge stuff are like how we're going to use virtual reality to like train your brain and, developing a smartphone app to diagnose people who could be predisposed to injuries out of the field. And you're like, okay, totally awesome. Also, the high school players down the street could probably do the prehab exercises we like already know reduce injury risk. Like,
yes, but that's more like dissemination of information than like the cutting edge information.
So there is some of that. And that is definitely a theme for me sitting there with academics that like underlies a lot of it, where I'm kind of like, oh man, guys, you probably should get out there and like, because of course they are out there. They're in the field. They work with world-class athletes all the time, but there's an amount where I think they don't talk to regular active training for a marathon type women.
Right. Or there's no one to like necessarily, this would actually be an interesting study, and maybe someone is doing it, like to quantify how well like female athlete information specifically is being shared down the track to like
downstream
to say the high school level.
There's one. So one of the themes that underlines a lot of active young women these days is a distrust of doctors, a distrust of science, and particularly birth control is like falling off a cliff.
Yes. Which
is like a leading edge. Like, I don't care if you're on birth control or not, but it's like a leading edge indicator because historically like 24-year-old women who were like very active runners or professional athletes did not want to be pregnant. And they're getting a lot of messages now, and this has been well documented in like mainstream publications, but there was a paper there too about like TikTok. They're getting a lot of messages from social media, and like those are heavily anti-hormone and anti-birth control.
Yeah.
And so there was a couple papers about that, but it also popped up just in some of the stats. Like somebody, had just, you go out and you try and find people for a study, and so somebody had gone out and just recruited, 200 like active runners, which ends up being like semi-elite runners because they wanted them to be running at least 4 times a week. And it was like 42% were not on any birth control. And only 10% were on the pill, which is, again, that's not a judgment. That's just that the pill used to be incredibly popular.
Yeah.
And I would like, to me, that number was just like shocking in terms of how that has shifted.
Right. I see. Did they have previous stats of how, like, what kind of percentage were on birth control before? Because there could be a certain percentage that aren't that aren't sexually active, or also aren't necessarily like straight, or have like just different factors that affect
different factors. And what I just thought was interesting was they didn't recruit for that. They just recruited for active young, like they just recruited for active runners, and then they ended up with an average age of 28 or whatever.
Yeah.
And then this was a side effect. Whereas like historically, when you polled and you just surveyed, you didn't, recruit for runners. You just surveyed active women in their 20s. Those numbers were almost reverse.
Yeah.
So I just find that very interesting.
Yeah, and I know we've talked about this before, but I know that you're someone who the pill has worked very well for in the past.
Oh yeah, I've been totally fine on it. So I know like a lot of people have super bad side effects.
Yeah.
So
and this came up the year that I was at the Female Athlete Conference. So that's probably 2.5 years ago now. But I remember someone presenting essentially what came across as like, the pill is awesome. And I also remember someone coming up from the crowd and kind of asking the question, like, which would be my question, because I had super bad side effects from the pill. Right. Like one of them being like depression. But I also had other physiological reactions that were really terrible. And so I kind of like, I have that level of understanding of why then like those of us who had those bad reactions started speaking up, and then that distrust, like I know where that distrust comes from. So essentially this person like asked the question, okay, but what about the fact that like we know from people's stories that the pill has affected people in this way? And I remember them not really having an answer. Like did that come up at all?
Very dismissive.
Very
dismissive. That's what I like.
Yeah.
That's what like was very frustrating, is like there's this undercurrent to me, just like, you know, going to a lot of these research meetings, listening to a lot, talking to like our coworkers, this undercurrent. But then like the woman who did her TikTok presentation, everyone's just like, oh, that's terrible. People are getting their information from TikTok. Instead of being like, well, why don't we go and meet people? Or just being like, oh, that's terrible. People are, you know, or when I asked the woman like, wow, that's like a lot of people not on birth control. Did you like ask? They're like, oh, I don't know. Maybe it's just something happening. Like there's not a question, like they're not meeting people where they're at.
Right.
Or and they're not listening. Like you're saying, a lot of people were saying like, I had really bad side effects. I had this. And now I think there's actually like a lot more pill options and a lot more variety. Yeah. And that's like part of, but they haven't gone back and like readdressed those issues. They've just been like, oh, because the other one that comes up all the time, and this came up, is cycle syncing, or like training with your cycle.
Yes.
And the researchers get up there and they're like, oh, no, there is no study, like academic research that shows this. There's no correlation. No research proves that this is a thing. And then they'll say, but women really feel like it makes a difference. But you know, women like that. And like they're women, these are women presenting. So they literally will say like, oh, well, athletes feel like there's a difference, but there's not. And you're like, well, this is why they feel ignored.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I definitely.
So to me, that's like this undercurrent, you know?
I definitely feel like there could have been some subtle shifts. Like, I don't know whether like cycle syncing goes down its own dark hole, you know, very quickly.
So does the anti-birth control stuff online,
I'm sure.
Super quickly.
Yeah, I'm sure. So like by talking about cycle syncing, I'm not saying like women should rest for 2 weeks out of every month, like in the luteal phase. Like that's not whatever. But like actually, if I had more information, I do feel like I would have got stronger, big training days and known when to rest a little bit more if we just in a subtle way like taken into account my cycle. And I know that like over, especially as an elite athlete, like over months, years, and then the years start to,
that would have added up.
It would have added up. I just have no doubts about that. So I feel like I wish they were taking it just slightly more seriously in terms of like how that could compound.
Instead, you do get a lot of like, oh, well, the media has talked about cycle syncing, and you're like, right. Is that what's happening?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, so that part is frustrating. It is super interesting, obviously, that there's all this money going into like female athlete research now, because the idea is that it'll trickle down to some degree to like just healthy lifestyle and women. And it's good that like there are these like totally different, in the research world, totally different fields talking to each other. That didn't happen before. So those things are all good. I'll tell you. So you want to know the two actual practical?
Yeah. So you told me.
Takeaways?
Yeah. I do want to know like some of the good things that, because we just like we were just like down on academia, but actually there's some really cool things happening. I love that they're studying.
Yeah.
This. And you
so,
said
like, the ACL
go ahead.
Stuff was super interesting, but like I said, like that's very cutting edge. Or like, you know, they're hoping to roll out kind of by the next World Cup some of this like new shoes, smartphone app type stuff. What I thought, so there was a whole segment about new research being done in fueling, which wasn't just like seriously eat more, which obviously is still very much true.
Yeah.
So the two things I actually took away was, one, I should be eating more fermented foods.
Fermented foods.
Yes, because this is like, again, you can take this in a weird direction on TikTok, I'm sure, and try and sell people stuff. But the actual microbiome experts will tell you that the microbiome has massively decreased since we kind of got away from hunting and gathering, and then as our strains of food like got smaller, like, you know, there used to be 40 kinds of apples and now there's like 6 kinds of apples, like that kind of, right? And so they can measure the microbiome over centuries, and like and the only way to like bring back more bacteria to your microbiome and improve the mood is to eat fermented foods.
The only way,
not like probiotics.
Not probiotics.
Not probiotics.
Okay, interesting, because I have taken probiotics before because of that, right? Yeah. Actually, it's interesting that I just, for some reason, these are the interesting thoughts I have in the morning. I woke up this morning with like, that was really good kimchi I had in Kona, and I just left it there in the fridge, and I didn't eat the rest of it. So it's in the back of my
now
mind.
they're studying it. They're studying like fermented foods in pregnant women, and if that passes it on to the baby. But anyway, this is like pretty well documented. Maybe don't go crazy, but fermented foods. So I was like, oh, maybe I should eat more.
Okay, I'm going to take that tip too. Okay, yeah.
You're going to take that tip too?
Yep.
Second one was, and again, this is one again where like people can go off a cliff. But a lot of evidence around, like we would call it time restricted eating, or like limiting your food window not to eating like around the clock 24 hours a day, but to 10 hours a day. This is like
their word for intermittent fasting, basically.
Right. Okay. They call it like limited, like instead of eating super late at night and super early in the morning, like limiting it to a window. And then somebody brought up the problem, of course, is that when you start to do that, if you're training heavily, you simply are not getting in enough calories, right? Like if you're limiting your window of eating to like 6 or 8 hours a day or something, you will end up fucking yourself.
I had trouble eating enough food just during a 24-hour period where I was allowed to eat at any time I wanted.
Right. And that's like more important. That is the number one thing you should do, right? So somebody did ask like, well, for athletes, like when we're trying to get them, especially like women, it ends up being like they don't eat enough then. What is like the minimum amount of time that you could that you still get benefits? And he was like 12 hours. Like everyone sees benefits if you limit your like to a 12-hour window, right? If you eat between like 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. or whatever. Just because it like utilizes more systems in your body, it has better sleep. So anyway, I was like, I'm going to try that. So I've been trying just to not eat, which basically means for me, just like not having another beer after 8 p.m. or like not eating like extra ice cream after 8 p.m.
What your normal schedule is. Because I definitely do 12 hours without trying on most days. But so you would have like a late night beer or ice cream.
Right.
That is like going into your 12-hour window.
And then obviously the other caveat there is like if you're going to work out in the morning, you like probably should still like if you're like I also don't tend to work out at like 6 or 7 a.m. So it's not an issue for me. If you're somebody who's like working out at 7, then it's like maybe your window is more like 7 to 7. Anyway, the point is don't take it crazy because again, people can like go off a cliff and it causes more. But I've been trying to like limit myself a little bit to 8 to 8.
And this 12-hour thing, this is for actual athletes? Like endurance athletes?
Right. So he was saying, so again, this is somebody who like literally researches the biology, like on a molecular level of time restricted eating. And they've like studied it in females and males and like with a fat heavy diet and a protein heavy diet. And like, then they measured performance. And this is like preliminary, like that is well documented. And then they're doing preliminary research on like performance in mice and making them run on these like different time restricted. And the point is, like you don't want you can really take it too far. But if you want to actually, for athletes, his direct quote was, everyone sees benefits at a 12-hour window.
Yeah, because it's super easy for me 1 hour a day exerciser, right? Sure. Where it gets harder is like previous forms of me that was like 6 hour a day exerciser.
And I think professional athletes probably may be the exception to this. But then again, like professional athletes are not doing a lot of things that are healthy.
Right.
Overall.
Fair.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So anyway, that's I've been trying not to eat after like 8 p.m. mostly.
Right. And how would you quantify like the state of research overall, the female athlete research, like coming out of the meeting? Oh, what is this? What were the concluding comments from the people in the know?
Historically, I think like historically it's been like, oh, this is not something we've spent any time on. And then all of the research was kind of on relative energy deficiency in sport and like what historically had been called like eating disorders. And that's been like the bulk of research for a long time. And I think now we're starting to actually get research in like other things. Like that's what I liked about like this fueling research was not just about like REDs. Right. It was like, here's other things
I'm so happy to hear
we
that.
are learning about. So,
yeah.
But there also is some cool things where like we heard from some pioneers. And so we have this clip at the very end of the kind of the meeting, the day meeting. We had this whole session with these like just women who had been like pioneers in their fields. And so we're going to hear from Tara VanDerveer, who's the second winningest coach in NCAA history. She's the Stanford basketball coach. And Carolyn Bertozzi, who is a Nobel laureate for Stanford. And here's a fun story. When she won the Nobel, Stanford was like, oh, there's a tradition when you win a Nobel Prize, you like come to a football game and you're honored. And she was like, okay, that's cool. But like, what about going to a women's sports game too? And they were like, no one's ever asked. Because apparently no woman had ever won a Nobel there before.
God.
So,
okay.
Anyway.
Did they add a women's event for her?
Yeah. So then she went to women's basketball because that's a big thing at Stanford. So I just thought that was fun. But they both grew up playing sports, kind of pre-Title IX and just as Title IX was going into effect. And so they talked about just like what it was like then and like how far we have come since then.
Women's athletics has been my life, period. I grew up playing sports. There was no Title IX at the time, so I was always watching boys play. And it was so painful because they'd say, well, Tara, you're the best basketball player in the 9th grade. The boys coach wrote that in my yearbook. And I never got to play on a team. It started out like there were no women's teams. There was no trainers for women. Like when I played in Indiana, we had an 8-game regular season schedule. I sprained my ankle. I was out for half the season. I mean, there was nothing that supported women in any way, shape, or form at all.
So, that was the kind of world I came into as a scientist. And so I think the way that women, Tara, you described not having an opportunity, not having a team that you were allowed to join, it's kind of like that for scientists, of my generation. There were just labs you couldn't join. They wouldn't hire you, categorically, right? And of course, what was sad about that is that we lost generation after generation after generation of potential science leadership, just the way athletics lost a lot of potential, female leaders. Fortunately, slowly, things have changed and opportunities grew, and I was really lucky because I came into my young adulthood just at a time when those doors were opening. I wasn't a good enough athlete, I think to look for those kinds of doors, although yes, I did get recruited to Harvard to play soccer, and that's a whole other story, but I was able to kind of break my way into opportunities in the chemical sciences. And when I was in high school, I was on a soccer team that my first 2 years of high school, we had a girls team and a boys team. So we had a girls team. They had started a team just a few years before I went to high school. But the girls team had no uniforms. We weren't allowed to play on the soccer field of the high school with the nets and everything. We were sent, a mile down the street to some big dust bowl and some abandoned parking lot with weeds sticking out of pavement and stuff, with orange cones as goals instead of nets. And that was my team for the first 2 years of high school. But then all of a sudden, in my 3rd year of high school, coach sat us down, he says, I have some amazing news. The school has to buy you uniforms too.
Okay, Kelly, I kind of teared up right at the end there when Carolyn described about getting the new kits. Like, yes. I don't think I had ever thought in those terms of like actually being a child when Title IX came into effect and being on a sports team and suddenly and having so few opportunities, or obviously noticing that like you don't have the same shit that the boys team does, and then suddenly being like, you get a uniform too, and that of course is more than that, right? Like you might get a proper change room or a proper field to play on or court or whatever that is. So I found that a little emotional, honestly.
Yeah, I was thinking about it after because they there was another woman who's like the head of the hospital there who's talking. And it's just like, man, that was not that long ago. And they all talk about how lucky they were that they came of age when things were starting to change. Mm-hmm. And I was like, that doesn't sound that lucky to me. Like, man.
Yeah. I mean, that's a perspective thing. Like, I don't think you get as far as they've got in life without having some sense of like, both gratitude and acceptance of the way things are and that moving forward to make things better.
Right, which obviously when we talked to Natalie Grabeau, who's the 80-year-old, who is the first 80-year-old to finish Ironman World Championships, she was like, I didn't get to do any sports. And then I got to start running in my 40s. Yeah. And you're like, that's crazy. But obviously you just kind of
you're like, that's wildly inspiring. And she's like, I just liked running. And then I needed to learn how to swim because I wanted to do a triathlon. So I got a coach and learned how to swim. I bought a book. Yeah. Oh, yeah, she did. She bought a book and learned how to swim. Like, what?
So there is something to these, because to me, and it's also why I have no patience in our sports and triathlon or any of the sports that like we've done advocacy and worked for these arguments now for the like, well, if we give women the space, then it'll take it away from men. That's what they said about the goddamn soccer fields back then too.
They say the same
I'm
things.
not into it.
They say the same things over and over and don't even realize that the same arguments are being regurgitated. Yeah.
So you sound like a 1950s basketball coach to me when you say that shit, just so you know.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen it even on our social media where people come on and will say, like, we'll be celebrating some female athlete or at the same time as celebrating, also saying all of the things that were working against them, you know, like all the hurdles they had to overcome. And invariably someone comes in, not always a man, like gender not specific, with, well, you should just be glad to be able to be there.
Sure.
You know, like, oh man.
Okay. Which brings us to the Winter Olympics this year. There are a few things that women are finally getting a chance in the Winter Olympics. Doubles luge, so the two people on the sled going down the that was my gesture, my motion to demonstrate.
In case you didn't know what doubles luge meant.
Fine. Skeleton is on your stomach, luge is on your back.
Okay,
anyway.
That's good. That's helpful.
There you go. Okay. And doubles luge. They are also finally getting to race the longest race in cross-country skiing, the 50 kilometer, which is like a pretty big deal in cross-country skiing universe, because there's some pretty epic women and they've never gotten to race longer than 30K, which is crazy. And then they are the ski jumpers. The ski jumpers are finally getting to go down the same hill as the men.
Finally. The thing that the thing that blows me away about the ski jumping, right, is that like in some sports there's like a bigger, would you call it, like biological advantage for men. Like you have like a VO2 max factor like a pure strength factor, or like with weightlifting or something like that like actually like it like biologically makes the men like a certain percentage on average better, right? Whatever, like the best male in the world versus, but like with ski jumping, right, besides like just like pure weight, it's such a skill sport, besides the fact that like kind of culturally we don't raise our girls to have that same level of
ski
like
jumpers,
or to like the risk involved, like those kinds of things. But there's like a lot of cultural factors that go into like how you might choose your sports, and ski jumping might not be at the top of your list, and less so for a girl. But like there's really nothing stopping. Like I don't. Somebody could come back at me with like, oh, here's the physiological.
I mean, the weight's definitely
like,
one, right? Like the weight is for sure
a
factor.
Yeah.
But they're not like, but the male ski jumpers are not like the biggest athletes ever, because you also still have to be like aerodynamic,
yeah, like
fast. And
they
all
could
that,
be this if they were the same size. It feels like that once the women's sports the women's side of the sport develops a little further, which as we're going to talk about, like it's been massively held back. You could see those numbers getting closer, I would think.
Yeah, so one of the things about ski jumping is that the top women have also always had to be like advocates, like starting GoFundMes and petitions, and so one of the women who actually had to like sign a lawsuit to like get ski jumping finally in the Olympics back in 2014.
She's called.
Yeah, I mean, so I was gonna say she had the overall record at the Vancouver ski, because there's obviously only so many of these ski hills in the world. And she had the record in Vancouver for a long time. So
the overall record.
So so clearly.
So I'm right.
I don't know if she still does.
That
she
goes
did for
to
a long
my
time.
point. Right.
So
okay, so we're on to something here. I just made that up off the top of my head, by the way. So I like that I'm right. We're going to see the women beating the men at some point.
At some point, right? Like now the men still ski jump further. It's very, very big in Europe. Like it's actually like a very prestigious, not prestigious, but like on TV and like big. So it's been a thing when they've like added women's ski jumping now, that like, if anybody remembers this, like last winter, there was this whole drama where like at one of the big events, the men won $10,000, whatever the equivalent was, $20,000. And the women won like a washing machine. It was something, it was like
that.
What? Like, right. But you know, wherever this was in Germany or Austria, and they were like, well, we're letting the women jump now. You know, the sport's not up there yet. The spectators aren't there. You should be thankful
to even be jumping, ladies.
Yeah. So ski jumping has been this like weird remnant. It didn't get in the Olympics till 2014. So it's not been in the Olympics for that long. That took literally like suing the FIS governing body.
Yeah. So Lindsey Van sued like the organizing committee for the Vancouver Olympics and then lost because like basically the situation was not governed by the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms.
Right.
So like, and we've seen this with other sports related lawsuits, is it's like whether the like who they sue and in what country and how you get changed there is actually like kind of difficult to like understand and unpack. And like people can be like, well, it's not us that decided, it's the federation, it's not us, you know?
Right. It's not our, we didn't do that yet.
Yeah. So she did. Anyway.
They did sue, and they sued under Canadian law in Vancouver, but then it wasn't governed by Canadian law, so too bad. But that did kind of impetus, and they finally got into the Sochi. But they've still had massive inequality because it wasn't. So when they didn't get in until 2014, the international head, was still saying stuff like, "Well, it'll hurt their baby making."
Oh,
right, like the landing, because they're baby making, because like the whole problem or the whole issue
will fall out.
Uteruses will fall out has been that like you jump off this hill, if you go fast enough, you actually literally like hang in the air. People say it's like, amazing, but then you land, and they've measured the forces are quite a lot with the landing, and so there's been this like, oh, women's bodies, they can't handle the landing, the forces.
But like how did that argument maintain itself like until a decade ago?
They were like, it's not. I mean, I think to a degree it's the same. So we have like big surfing competitions here, and women weren't allowed in for a really long time. But they would say like, well, it's not that we're not allowing women; it's that it would be unsafe for them. They're not prepared. They would get hurt.
Right. So there's like some kind of so you said so in 2026, right, in Milan, we're going to have like a bigger ski jump essentially for the women,
right?
And it's the first
they're
time
going to actually get to go off
the big hill jump, right? So some of these arguments are really just coming to a close, right? Because previously they would have gone off a smaller one, and I'm guessing that because we've seen the same arguments over and over again, like we've talked about, so I can guess what they are, which is like that the women's field is not prepared for the bigger hill, and now they're ready, apparently.
Now they're ready. Yeah, it was the whole like, oh, they haven't developed. We'd love to have women, but they're just not ready. It's for their own good. It's not safe.
Well, the interesting thing for me is like we had like the first kind of recorded woman ski jumper. It was from 1863. She was like this 16-year-old Norwegian, and her like distance wasn't recorded, but like there was not a women's smaller jump set up, I'm assuming. I'm just making some assumptions here because she's the first one that she went on the men's and she got through it and she did not lose her uterus. So we should have just gone off of that in 1863.
And been like, they're good. They're fine.
They're fine.
It's fine. So kudos though, they have been doing they have had to, and I think we both know it's exhausting to try and compete and also advocate for yourself, but they have had to do that. Even like last year they were like GoFunding prize money to have like equal prize money at World Cups. So now they finally get to go down the big hill at the Olympics in February. We should say, I guess we should say at the top, the Olympics start February 6th in Milan, Cortina, and the Paralympics start March 6th right after. So there's not like a big gap like there was last year. And it's in Milan / Cortina, which I believe is just like nearby in Italy. So there's been a lot of news coming out though. I was going to say it's in Italy. So apparently a bunch of the US athletes are concerned that people don't like Americans right now.
Are you surprised, Kelly?
I'm like, oh, that's a shame.
But not as much, like I said before, not as much as we dislike the Russians. So the bar is kind of low between like doping violations, wars.
I know they're letting us compete, right? But they literally skiing is not allowing Russians at all. So since the Ukrainian invasion, Russian athletes have had to petition to be neutral athletes. There's like an acronym for it, but it's like individual authorized neutral athlete. And to do that, they have to like prove that they're like not pro the invasion. It's a whole really weird, like the woman who just won the gymnastics all around. Yeah. People like she had to like withdraw from running for her like local city council. And people were like, well, she posted on Facebook for like a year ago that she was in support of the invasion. And that was going to like negate. I think the argument is that they don't want athletes who are going to use it as like a platform.
Right.
And also they're trying to draw a line between like athletes who have lived abroad forever and or like have nothing to do with it. But that does get really weird, right? When you're sitting there judging, like if someone's
I was gonna say, like,
in
do
support
they
of something or not.
fill out a survey? How does that work?
Yeah,
exactly. How do
very
you
weird.
guarantee that someone's not for the invasion?
And it's also like Russia obviously views this as like very persecuting of their athletes, of course. So it's left up to every sport what they want to do. And skiing, which oversees snowboarding, downhill skiing, ski jumping, cross country, all those things, biathlon, has decided no Russian athletes.
None.
So
now they can't even qualify under the NIA or whatever it is. That we just talked about.
AIN.
AIN. Interesting. Because we haven't seen that. Like in Paris, we saw like the non-affiliated athletes competing.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, like figure skating is the big one that you see them competing at. But yeah,
so there's still some time for appeals and stuff like that to happen. So we might still see some athletes competing under a non-Russian flag.
Yeah. There's the Russian. This is where it gets right. The Russian Federation is suing the skiing federation to allow their athletes to compete as non-Russian athletes. It's all very like that's where you're like, okay, it's weird. But
yeah, but the Russian Federation should be defending the needs of their athletes. So it seems weird, but not, right? Like that should be their job.
So we'll see what happens with that. But yeah, it'd be weird to have no Russian because the other thing about the Winter Olympics is that there's only 6 sports governing bodies.
Right.
Which is actually very few because like it's so condensed in sports. So if one whole governing body has decided no Russian athletes, and
it's skiing.
All the Russian athletes.
So that's a huge number of the actual events. Yeah.
The other thing skiing and snowboarding announced was that they are going to start doing the SRY gender testing that track and field did. It's really weird though, because they decided this at their meeting like a month ago, but then at the same one they decided no Russian athletes. But then they didn't announce a timeline, and then they recently, like last week, announced that they're going to implement it starting for the 26-27 World Cup season. So it won't be implemented for the Olympics, but the U.S. is already like trying to like round people up and implement the test.
Yeah. Yes, like that's how I read it too, that the U.S. was trying to identify athletes who need to take eligibility tests, which is to compete as a female, which is like, what now? Okay, now you're asking. I mean, we've seen this in other sports, right? But now are the athletes themselves like dubbing in other athletes who they think might have some kind of genetic advantage?
I read it that way too, but then I think, Sarah, that they actually just meant that they're trying. You know how track implemented it so last minute, and then all these athletes were all over the world, and they couldn't find a place to do the test, and in some countries it's banned.
Yeah,
like that kind of testing is against the law. So I actually think what the U.S. was trying to say was that they're trying to find out which athletes need help getting the test and like helping
that's
them
what they were
find
trying
the right
to say.
location.
Okay.
That's what I think they were trying to say, was that they're trying to identify which athletes have already had the test and which athletes need to find a facility. Like they're trying to support them.
Right.
But the way it read was we're trying to find out who's not a woman.
I know. I just like, oh my God. Yeah. So the way that like when I was reading about this, at first I was like, I read about like the International Ski Federation looking at the 2027 season for implementing this. And I was like, that's great because we won't have the same problems we had with track and field where athletes were like kind of screwing up their whole prep because they had to go find a test and get this thing done. And then it was like, except the US who are like going to try to implement it now. Like, oh, damn.
I think both that I think they were trying actually just to like get ahead of it and like make sure everybody has the resources they need. I also think I told you this, that they're trying to make the like gesture to the political climate that like, oh yeah, we're on it. Please don't rescind our funding. You know what I mean? Like, because technically the president issued this like executive order, which are not legally binding, and we don't have to follow executive orders, but people just like do anyway. And so they're trying to say like, oh yeah, we're doing that. Don't worry. We're on like, because there's been so many issues where like, all of Harvard had their funding pulled, and like the Olympic, like the USOPC obviously doesn't want that to happen.
Yes.
In the next 2 months, because that would be bad.
Yes. I
wonder why people don't like us. Yeah.
Why don't they like the Americans right now, Kelly? It's a mystery. I can't with the sex testing. I'm very tired.
Of sex testing?
Well, just this entire environment, which like it just feels like you put, first of all, like nature can't even create a line. We've talked about this a million times, but nature can't even create a line between male and female. But now we're going to ask science too. And invariably, like whatever line you choose ends up being like a limit on women's potential, right? So for the men, it feels like sport then just continues to be this like how high, how far, how fast, like any biological advantage that you might have is okay, right? Because you're a guy. Whereas like on the women's side, we're just like, we change every decade what the test is, first of all, right? So that on the women's side, we're like, we need to protect women's sports. So we're going to arbitrarily decide like what a line between, and not arbitrarily, but they're going to try to use some science to protect women's sports. But invariably, you end up then like limiting women's potential. Like it's all based in this, it's all like couched in this thing
because it becomes oh, you're too good, that's suspicious.
Yeah, of like this like it kind of just puts this whole environment around women's sports that like if you're not, that they need to be protected. Why do they need to be protected? Because somehow the special subcategory of sport that like you're going to have this huge advantage if you're like a man, right? That it just feels ick to me.
Of course it's ick. It doesn't feel ick. It is ick, right? Because it also is like using, I was at an event, like a non-us work, like my husband's work event a couple weeks ago, and somebody was asking me what I do. And I was trying to explain that like all issues play out first in sports and often in women's sports, like cultural issues play out here first. We're like the leading edge.
Sports is the microcosm of society. I was trying to think of that phrase on one of our previous episodes and I didn't think of it till after. Anyway, continue.
Anyway, it's true though, right? Because it's just, it doesn't feel ick. It is ick. The NWSL, the pro soccer league here, is going through this right now because a player who's actually like on her way out and was like not a star player wrote an op-ed for the New York Post, naturally, about how they need gender testing in the NWSL. And then, all like to their credit, all of her co-players, teammates,
co-players,
yeah, teammates were like, "This is terrible. Like, this is not what we are, who we are." Like but the NWSL statement was because they are trying to, a little bit like we talked about last week, and then we'll talk about in a second, thread that line between like who they think their fans are and so they came out with this statement that was like, we're not in support of that, but not so strong as to say like we support women who may not be on the traditional gender like I was about to say we support trans players, but obviously like gender testing also encompasses non-trans players and it captures everybody. They came out with a statement that was like, there are currently no women playing who were not assigned women at birth. And you're like, okay. I mean, true. This isn't a real problem.
But do they even know the difference between a trans player and SRY testing?
Because then the other half of it is like, if you're going to say there are no players, and someone pointed this out, there are no players playing right now who were not assigned female at birth. How do you know?
Right.
Like, you haven't gone around and checked everyone's genitals or implemented sex test or implemented this like SRY genetic testing because it makes no sense. So you're kind of just taking everyone at their word, which is what we could just do.
Right. Which you're basically announcing that you're making up a problem that doesn't exist. Yeah.
So anyway, I appreciated that they like lukewarm support and they were like, this isn't a real problem. But it was also a little bit like, okay. So I feel like this leads us, Sarah, to our new segment. Like we were saying, where we're going to follow up on all our previous conversations.
As we were saying, ... And which previous conversation are we following up on today?
Right. Okay. So first, last week we talked all about the WNBA and how their players, if a large portion of your fan base doesn't think billionaires can exist, can you eventually become a billionaire or do you lose those fans? And then right after we were talking about that, this new basketball league got announced.
Oh, yeah. Like literally the next day, Project B. funded maybe by Saudi Arabia.
Which I think is really, so it's a new basketball league, very much in the style of like Live Golf, right? Where they're saying they're paying like $1 million salaries. They're going to play in the offseason WNBA. It's not
$2
technically
million
a competitor.
salaries.
I know.
Mm-hmm.
It's not technically a competitor WNBA because it's going to run November to March in the offseason. But obviously, if everybody signs big contracts with this new 5-on-5 regular league, then it will obviously change the market. But like you said, the report came out and then it was backed by the entertainment arm of the Saudi Public Investment Fund. Mm-hmm. And obviously people freaked out, as that fan base would.
Okay.
And then the founder gets out there and is like, no, there is no Saudi money. No. We're just partnering with the entertainment arm as an events company to put on like one of the event. Like they partner with lots of events.
I think the other thing I think is funny is that like the folks coming out being like, no. Like, no, the folks coming out saying, oh, the Saudi money is bad, probably don't understand how much Saudi money makes the world go round and like a lot of the other things that they do too. Like there's probably not a thorough understanding of like how the global money systems work. Like not that I'm claiming that I have it, but like that I understand it, but it's it's complicated.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know that I would if I had to pick between women's sports league, I would probably pick the one that's not Saudi based.
Right.
Given ongoing issues with.
Sure. But then how
women.
do you know, like in this particular case, how would we know what? Because I'm guessing like the entertainment division of whoever they partnered with and the Saudi company.
The public investment fund, the PIF, right?
Yeah.
Has an entertainment arm called SELA or whatever. Which funds a lot of its like sports and entertainment.
Right. I'd just be curious what else they invested, if that makes sense.
Right. So they invested in a lot of things. And that was what the guy came out and was like, no, SELA, they've partnered with this thing and this thing and this thing. Like you and it's cool, guys. So it is kind of funny, kind of predictable, obviously, that the fan base was not, but they are signing huge contracts. They signed Nneka Ogukami. I think I said that right. I said that wrong. Ogumike, who is also the head of the Players Association.
I know, that's an interesting.
Which is
I think that's how it ended up making such big news.
Yeah, because you're in negotiations with WNBA. You come out big that you signed with this other league for like, I mean, she didn't say what it was, but we're assuming it was $1 to $2 million. Yeah. And like WNBA salaries are capped right now at a couple $100,000. Yeah. And you're like, oof.
And that's
a statement.
You're the head of the Players Association. Like,
so.
Okay. I mean, it made a point.
It's interesting. I feel like we got a couple of listener comments. Send us your voicemails. And people were mostly for women should get as much money as they can.
Yeah, I thought that was I thought that was a really great comment. And I'm glad that people sent that to us because I think it was kind of a closing point of our conversation that we didn't really get to. Right. Which is like, because we were sort of thinking about, okay, like to your quote that we put on social, like that we've thought about men's sports in the way of like, they should be paid these big dollars. So we've kind of grown up in that, whatever, but that women's sports have always been to some extent about like doing the right thing, doing good, making the world a better place. And so, yeah, I think that needed to be said that like, it's okay for women to also go after making money. Yeah.
A lot of times, when we talk about like women are better at X, like better at leadership, they're more empathetic, or I forget what the one I was reading was about today, but women are, in this case, like they tend to listen more, or they tend to pace better in marathons, whatever. I'm always like, well, is that just reflecting back societal stereotypes?
To some extent it is. Yeah, it has to be.
Right.
It has to be.
Right. Are women better at pacing marathons? And they always talk about how it's because they had to overcome so many hurdles to get to the start line, so they want to make it worth it. And you're like, well, maybe you shouldn't have to overcome so many hurdles, and it's fucking fine if you blow up in the middle and go out blazing. Right.
Yeah, that's why we always
I'm always very concerned about that.
We always have to hold that tension between like women are better. It's like on average right now where we are in culture and history, women are better. So we need to be able to name those things, like women are better at X or men trend towards this or whatever. Like we we need to be able to say them, but also recognize like that doesn't make it like a biological destiny that like women are forever better at this thing. It's like there's no way to pull that apart to know like, are women more empathetic on average now because of how we're raised and culturally the environment we're in, or because of some like innate empathy that we have? Like, so
I'm going with probably the first one.
Yeah, I'm 100% agree with you on that. However, that's we don't know. Like, it's good to have that. I mean, it's just good to have that information, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is always, obviously, we've talked about this too. This is always one of my things when people talk about like parenting or motherhood too, right? Is you're like, I'm very skeptical of anything that's like like some natural biological thing. Well, like, you learned a lot of stuff that you don't even know you learned.
Yeah, it's super. So. You know, when I was super convinced about this was and I might have brought this up in the podcast before, so sorry if I'm repeating myself. But I remember it because it was notable to me. Like, I was in a sociology of the family class. I think I was in second or third year, and they had done studies of like hundreds and hundreds of babies, and that people naturally, you know, those like carrier things that you have on your front, right? That they would turn boy babies and face them out to the world naturally in those carrier things, and girl babies, people would turn them in towards them. And I'm like, oh, right, of course, because socialization starts like before we even consciously recognize how we're socializing our kids. Like, people who try to tell me I raise my boys and my girls the same, like, that's impossible. You did not. I think it's worthy to try to do that, absolutely, but like that's an impossible goal.
Sure. But you should be aware. I also had a friend who was telling me that, oh, well, you know, because he has like an 8-year-old. Oh, well, you know, boys and girls, they just play differently. You just can see it when you go to the school. The boys, they're just running all around, and the girls are just standing there. And you're like, oh my God. Like, that didn't just happen like randomly.
Yeah. Like, that's...
Let me tell you about all the times when I was 8 and wanted to play and was told. Well, and then you learn it over time.
And when you think about like socialization, even for us as mammals, you know, or I studied a lot of sociology, anthropology. Like, most mammals come out with more formed. Like, we have these like our babies like cannot survive on their own, whereas a lot of mammals can like walk away. You know, ours cannot. Like, the socialization process is so long over so many years. Like, we are so created by our environments, more so than any other creature.
I forget where we started with this.
I don't know.
So women are not naturally more empathetic. They should get the money. That was where we started with this. So go get your money.
It's fine to go get your money. That's totally fine. Totally fine thing to do.
Totally fine. Yeah. You might lose people on the way, but totally fine. You get yours. I mean, people might hate you. That's the other part, right? Like, people might not like you. That's okay too. That's fine. Some people might not like you. Yep. It happens.
Some people won't like you. That's how it is.
Some people definitely won't like you.
Yeah.
Other thing we following up on, should Kelly do the 100K or the 100 mile at UTMB? We had 4 votes, and like 2 of them were you and me.
Yes. And well, I think you're the only one that voted for yourself to do the 100 mile. But I think that maybe since you voted that, you should do it.
I will tell you, I was at a friend's birthday party on Saturday and talking to somebody I hadn't seen in a while, you know, cyclists, blah, 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 and telling her about this. And she was like, as a PT, I should tell you to do the shorter one. But I sort of agree with the assessment that it's all going to be long and hiking for like 30 plus hours. So why not? I was like, there you go.
Yeah.
So that's
Have you decided?
No, I have another month to decide. I'm waiting to see, you know, when you're getting fitter again, this is if you're watching on YouTube, you're getting fitter again, suddenly it like turns and you start getting a lot fitter.
You hit an inflection point.
You hit an inflection point. So I'm waiting to see if that happens, because it should have, and then I crashed my bike instead. So it didn't happen.
I feel like this is the story of Kelly's athletic career. Yeah. I was about to hit the inflection point, and I crashed my insert something here.
Yeah. All right. Feisty picks of the week, Sarah. I'm going to go first with a little one, but like, I think a lot of people saw different videos over the weekend of like the men's soccer team up in Canada playing the championship in the snow. There was a couple like college games in the snow, and there was the NCAA Community College National Cross Country meet. total blizzard. So this is my picks for Lainey Vecchio, who won in like 20 minutes on the 5K in a total blizzard for the national like junior colleges championship title. And we will share that video in the show notes because it made me think back to my
Did you run in the snow
days? Well, I grew up in Chicago, so.
Okay, so you did run in the snow quite a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like a good snow run. I don't know if I want it to be on the cross country, national cross country championships, but I do love a good snow run. So, okay, my pick of the week is Elena Rybakina. Did I say that right? Who won $5.2 million in the Women's Tennis Association finals on Saturday, which is incredible. Just that amount of money just blows me away.
Like talking about Saudi money makes the world go round. It was in Riyadh, yeah.
Was in Riyadh. Okay. And she upset the number one Aryna Sabalenka in straight sets. She did. And that whole finals is interesting. It's like 8 players. Everyone gets $300,000 just for showing up. You get $300K for every match you win. You get another 2.5 for winning the final. Yeah.
So you can make some money.
So speaking of socializing daughters, if you want them to make big money in sports, take the Venus and Serena parenting route.
Yeah, that's a choice. So, all right, next week we are going to be talking about hockey. We're going to have our Feisty hockey expert come on and help us get ready for the PWHL season, kind of all the issues around hockey's culture, and then we'll talk eating disorders, I think, the week after that. If you liked what you heard, give us a rating. If you didn't, give us a rating too. Share with your friends. We are on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts, and we will be back next week.